Hazak u'Baruch. Good morning, Morai ve'Rabotai. Be'ezrat Hashem Mincha this week is going to be 4:25. Please be on time. As the halachot we were learning, we have to advance one further concept, which the word in Hebrew is called Aniva. Now, if you ask somebody on the street, what is Aniva? They'll tell you, oh, a tie. The tie a person wears. That's modern Hebrew. In the context of the Gemara, Aniva doesn't mean particularly a tie. It means a certain type of a knot, which in English is called a slip knot. Which is why it's called an Aniva, because a lot of times ties are tied in a way that's a slip knot. So what is the halacha regarding a kesher that is called an Aniva kesher, a slip knot type of knot? So the thing about a slip knot is that whenever you have a slip knot, it looks like a knot, but the second that you pull on it, it opens up, it unravels completely. And that's the difference between an actual knot. If you pull on it, it becomes stronger. And a slip knot, when you pull on it, it doesn't exist anymore. That's what makes it an aniva. So the halacha is, an aniva is not called a kesher, which means that even if you had an aniva that was permanent, for one reason or another, you said, this slip knot, I'm keeping it here forever, it's not called a knot. And therefore, there's no prohibition. And similarly, anytime you tie two things together, let's say you have two strings and you put it together in a way that it's only once twisted on each other, that's also not called a knot. Until you do a second tying, that would be called a knot. So we have two different concepts. One is one kesher and one is an aniva. Both of those are not called knots no matter how long you keep it there. A good example would be a plastic bag. If you tie the two ends and you just, put it on each other and then go once, that's not a knot. But the minute that you do the second one, that's already called a knot. An aniva would be a slip knot. So what's the halacha when I take a knot and I put a slip knot on top of it? It's called aniva al gabe kesher. And essentially, when do we do aniva al gabe kesher? When you tie your shoes. A person ties his shoes. The first thing he does is a small knot, one knot, and then he does a slip knot. There's different ways to do it, but that's essentially what it is. What is the halacha when there is an aniva al gabe kesher? Maran writes that essentially, even if it's for permanent, afilu al da'at litkayem, it is mutar me'ikar adin. It is permitted to make a slip knot on top of a knot, because even that is not called a knot. Since both of those things individually are not knots, even when you combine them, it's not called a knot. That's the opinion of the Shulchan Aruch, and essentially that is the halacha according to Chacham Ovadia Yosef for Sfaradim. The Ben Ish Chai, interestingly, and the Ben Zion and the Ashkenazi Poskim, they take a stronger approach. They say, no, if it's for permanent nature, then it's a problem. And even Rav Ovadia says, even though I said it's allowed, really it's appropriate, it's better to be mahmir if it's done permanently. However, if it's done within a week, to be permitted to be undone within a week, then it is mutar lechatchila. So it comes out, there's really two standards. One is, you can't really protest if a person says, I'm doing a slip knot on top of a knot forever. There's no protesting because afi da halacha, it's permitted. However, one individually should be mahmir and only do such a thing if it's going to be opened within a week. So the typical example, shoes, would be permitted for everybody. Even the Ashkenazim would hold it's mutar because that's a knot with a slip knot on top, and then you permit it within the same day. Everybody would hold that's fine. Sfaradim, you could extend it up to a week. If a person does a tie, and he says, I'm going to do my tie on Sunday, and right before Shabbat, I undo it. Comes out according to Chacham Ovadia, it's permitted lechatchila. However, if one does a slip knot on top of a tie, like sometimes when people tie their ties, that's what they do, and they do it for permanent, then it becomes asur according to some of the poskim. Chacham Ovadia holds technically it's allowed, but it's better to be mahmir. And therefore, in those cases, one should not make such a knot or undo such a knot unless it's going to be done and undone within a week. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen ve'amen.